You're listening to the new media. You're listening to Mitchell Talks. Learn more at MitchellTalks.com and follow me, Scott Mitchell, on Twitter at MitchellTalks. Back for session number 2, the News9 Sessions, Mitchell Talks. Grant Hermes, AM anchor extraordinaire, and Aaron Brilbeck, the Capitol Chief. As we tape this morning, we don't know much about the shooter at Lake Hefner, but aren't you guys ready for a gun debate?
It's already started on Twitter. I mean, there are several lawmakers from up the Capitol already talking about, thank goodness this second guy was there who brought down the shooter with a gun. He was an armed citizen. But isn't it too bad that this other guy had a gun in the first place? I've seen quite a bit of that so far out there in the political Twitter sphere.
Right. And same thing. It's, we're hearing the whole, the old argument that what stopped a bad guy with a gun was a good guy with a gun.
It'll be interesting to see what happens now from folks like Cootie who put up 1212, and that this was part of their argument for trying to get that through, and then the governor vetoed it, even though there were people up at the Capitol, like you said, Aaron, last week, that they didn't want this to go through. So it'll be interesting to see if people change their stories, at least behind the scenes.
It'll be interesting to see, too. I suspect that they're going to come back probably in July if the medical marijuana bill passes, which we'll be talking about that in just a little while. But if the medical marijuana bill does pass, they're going to have to come back into special session. They're going to have to discuss these things. And I believe it was Nathan Dahm that said that, among other things, he wants to reintroduce the gun bill 1212, which would allow anybody who is 18 years of age or older without a felony conviction to be able to carry a handgun without a permit and without any type of training. And it'll be interesting to see how people vote then, because it passed overwhelmingly in both the House and the Senate at a time when these guys are, going on the campaign trail. If the very same people are voting against it, the question is why? Was it all about votes, or was it about guns? where were your priorities?
We don't know what that would have to do with last night, right? We don't know if the guy that...
Right.
Yeah, we already veered off track.
Yeah, we jumped off from that. We're just assuming that, as in other cases of public shootings or mass shootings, this wasn't a mass shooting. It's, I think, one short of a mass shooting. I think it's 5.
I think so.
Which is an awful way to look at these things. But we've seen that this is where the conversation is politically tends to go almost immediately after these events happen. So obviously we're just looking ahead.
Yeah, and you hit it on the head too, Grant, in terms of this is where the debate is going to be, because you've got two sides of the debate here being represented. The bad guy with a gun, we've got too much access to guns. How did this guy get the gun in the first place? What was his background? And on the other side, again, you've got the argument of a good guy with a gun stopped a bad guy with a gun.
And not to be glib about it, but it might make this an interesting case where these arguments get played out and worked out with each other, because they might have to talk directly to one another instead of past one another like they usually do.
I'm not going to hold my breath.
Me either.
So MSNBC will be in town today, probably wanting to know why anybody had a gun, and Fox will be here trying to find out why the guy didn't have 3 guns that he was shooting back. Yeah, I mean, you know how this is going to go. So, all right, we're veering off into national stuff and local stuff. Let's start with the News9 News on 6 polls this week. Any surprises? You've got medical marijuana, AG, lieutenant governor. It's a Bill Shepard poll. And I've already heard from the Richardson people taking issue with his methodology, saying that they're still in it. But clearly there are 3 to 4 front runners in the governor's race, and Jones and Fisher, that they ought to go to the House, right? Joe Exotic, I don't think he even showed up, I don't think. So your thoughts?
Which is unfortunate. I love Joe Exotic. He would have made things so much more exciting here.
And a personal relationship with Joe Exotic for you. Because you don't know, Aaron was attacked by a tiger.
Several tigers.
Several tigers at once.
Several
he fought
tigers.
With his bare hands. It was impressive.
I remember the shot. Did he reimburse you for the shirt?
Was never reimbursed for the shirt that got shredded by the tigers. No.
One of the things I thought was surprising from the polls is Mike Hunter.
Yeah.
Being behind right now, which is interesting.
Not a little bit behind either.
A lot behind in that Shepard poll. He's all over the place. It was unexpected. Yeah.
And honestly, I'm not really sure why. I mean, what also surprised me was the ads. This has turned into a really ugly race. And who would have guessed that at a time when we've got a gubernatorial race, we've got so many legislative seats up, that the real ugly, nasty one is going to be the race for attorney general. Who would have thought that? I mean, given how many people are running and the scope of who's running. I mean, this is akin to a dog catcher's race. It's not really that big of a deal. Nobody's going to be rushing to the polls to vote for the next attorney general. But this got real nasty real quick. And I'm wondering how much that had to play into the way the polls are reflected.
I think a lot of what had to play into these results is the push that Hunter was a lobbyist for a while.
A Washington insider.
A Washington insider, which Oklahomans have a pretty strong aversion to. And that showed in 2016. I'm sure it's going to show again in 2018. I think this is almost a microcosm of that thinking.
And kudos to Gettner Drummond's campaign for seizing that and for jumping all over that.
For knowing that, yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably what it is. But obviously we're a little ways out, so we'll see where Hunter ends up shaking out.
Right. And again, it's kind of funny because on the calendar, we're not too far away from the primaries. But realistically, we're a lifetime away, and there's a lot that can change between now and then.
Absolutely. I thought the thing that Shepard had an interesting analysis in our show yesterday that if you look at the split between where people stand, and now the methodology on this is a little interesting, so bear with me. The questions were an imaginary candidate for Congress. Are you going to vote Republican or Democrat? 53% said they're going to vote for a Republican in Oklahoma. And then you go to the governor's race and you see that both Republicans beat Drew Edmondson at 33% of the vote. And he said that should be a dire warning, or his exact words, for Republicans in the state because there's a 20-point split. Now, some of that getting to an imaginary candidate to a well-known candidate with 40% undecided in the governor's race isn't exactly apples to apples, but it's still, apples to fruit. So that's an interesting look here. Do we think that Oklahoma is going to be a part of that expected Democratic push this November?
And that's a very good possibility. I mean, I don't know if we're necessarily going to go full on, just lose the red altogether. But I think that we're going to see some losses in seats. I don't necessarily think that it's because of a strong Democratic Party. I think that it's because of a weak Republican Party. And we've seen a really poor performance by Republicans who controlled the both houses of the legislature and the governor. We saw very, very poor performance up at the Capitol with multiple special elections. We had a last minute push for an unconstitutional tobacco tax that most legislators knew was going to be unconstitutional, but they passed it anyhow because, we've got a balanced budget rule here in Oklahoma. We have to pass a balanced budget and we're not going to worry about the consequences. We'll deal with that later. And I think that a lot of Oklahomans were like, this is a little bit ridiculous.
Just a lot of fed upness. I think people are going to vote that way, both in June and in November. And I think that those two numbers might be an indication of that.
Yeah, but I don't think it's so much because of a strong Democratic presence in Oklahoma. I think
agree.
It's a whole lot of, we got to throw the bums out kind of an attitude.
Right. I agree.
Looking forward to the first Republican for statewide office that has the governor come in and on their behalf and campaign for them. Should I hold my breath on that one? Not going to happen, right?
I don't know which candidate would want her to, quite honestly.
I mean, certainly it's not going to be the lieutenant governor. They broke with each other quite a while ago.
Right.
He's attaching himself to the president in all of his ads and his press releases and in what he's been saying. So I don't know. I don't think anybody is going to ask for her endorsement.
You want your useless trivia story of the day. 1994 Attorney General race in Oklahoma. The Democrat nominee was a guy by the name of Drew Edmondson.
The name rings a bell.
The Republican nominee was a guy by the name of Mike Hunter. Mike's been in this race before. That's 24 years ago, right? So we'll see where that goes. But this Drummond fella is very aggressive. It was interesting. A couple of weeks ago, there was a guy by the name of Casey Gwinn, who was a city attorney at San Diego, started these for President Bush, 43, was he? W. So he was in town doing the strangulation institute they have, which, by the way, if you're dealing with domestic violence issues and your man puts his hands on your throat, you need to leave because, from what I'm learning, he's going to kill you.
Yeah.
So they're here in town doing this seminar for law enforcement, district attorneys, domestic violence, people that do recovery, run these shelters. And he was very, very close to Gettner Drummond years ago and getting some things started in Tulsa, his family justice centers. And he said, Gettner Drummond is a real deal. So we've seen that this week.
Yeah, and I don't know if Hunter underestimated him. I don't know if Hunter's campaign underestimated him, but he definitely came out swinging.
We'll see where that goes. Now, the governor's race. So I guess the only question from what I saw with Shepard's numbers is Gary Richardson in or out? He's in the first tier or the second tier. The Richardson people say yes. But other than that, you've got either top 4 or top 3. Nobody's paying attention to lieutenant governor's race. Anything about the Democrats in there and anything?
Not really. Edmondson seems to have it sewn up. I mean, if we're looking at all of the races, it was comparing, assuming Drew Edmondson is going to be the Democratic nominee for governor here. That's just how everything has been comparing it. He's got a pretty good lead in that side of the race. I don't think there's a real chance. He did raise a lot of money. He outraised his opponents by quite a bit. I think that plays in here.
Yep, I can't disagree.
All right, let's get to the state questions. Isn't that's sneaking up? There have been some great stories this week. I saw Mickey Thompson. Which one of you guys did the story on Mickey?
Dana Hurtnicki.
Dana.
Okay.
Yep.
Dana, she's sneaky, and she gets these great stories. So you have this $7.99, this decline to sign $7.99, the rollback, the Coburn folks. So they're fighting in the streets out there. They're also fighting in court.
That's right. So there are 2 challenges up right now. The first one is the Professional Oklahoma Educators Group. They filed a challenge with the Supreme Court to say that it's unconstitutional because in the HB 1010XX, which is the teacher pay raise bill, that bill said it was necessary for public health and safety. And to try to repeal a bill that was passed for public health and safety, or a law rather at this point, that was passed for public health and safety is unconstitutional. The other one is by this decline to sign 799 group, which is about a dozen teachers organizations and some individuals, including OEA, OSSBA, I believe the Rural Association of Oklahoma Schools. I'm messing up the name of that group, but that's who they are. It's a kind of a hodgepodge of different groups. And they're saying that their objections to it should also be attached to the POE. So both are going to get heard on June 11th at the Supreme Court because they've been fast-tracked. Because, Aaron, what you talked about last week about school districts not being sure if they can give teachers raises or offer them, right?
Right.
So,
and a lot are holding off on that.
And a lot of attorney questions in school districts and counties, whether they should even start doing this because they don't know if this money is going to stick around. So we'll see where that shakes out. It'll be in front of the Supreme Court on June 11th here. I still haven't heard back from anybody with Oklahoma Taxpayers Unite about where they're getting this $660 million number either. Have you, Aaron? I
have not. And the Board of Elections just this past week sent out a list of questions about that to the Attorney General's office because they don't really, I mean, there's still a lot of unanswered questions in terms of if this does pass, when this tax applies, how it's going to affect teachers. It's just, there are a lot of unanswered questions. And you're right. This group, Taxpayers Unite, really haven't come out and said where they expect to find this $600 million. Now, that said, their argument is bolstered quite a bit by what was going on over at the health department. We lost 30 million. Oh, we found 30 million. Oh, we lost 30 million again. We had it the whole time and we're going to lay off 200 people. We're going to run 2 sets of books and tell the legislature one thing and operate off for another set of books entirely. It makes it very difficult for the voter to say, you know what? We've got enough confidence in government that we're okay with the largest tax increase in the history of the state to fund teacher raises. They've got a good argument now.
It's like a Stephen King novel. No, it's like a Stephen King novel. I mean, the thing you can't ever get to. It's like the hero wins the movie, and you're starting to go off, and then the zombie pops up again.
It eats his brain. Same thing, yeah. And there's a lot of brain eating going on right now, I think.
News9 also had an interview with Bates. Was that you? The interim?
No, I don't think so.
I don't know who did that interview. We did have him, though.
Oh, maybe that was Alex.
It might have been Alex.
I think it was Alex.
I didn't see who did the interview. I just caught a piece of it in between sleeping.
Can you just imagine? Hey, this boat that had a big hole in it and went to the bottom of the ocean, we're building another one, and you get to be the captain. I mean, it's a no-win situation. And these House members who were jumping through hoops, have you heard any? They got to be real unhappy because they got blamed more than the executive branch, right?
Yeah.
On the health department thing.
Let me take you back real quick. That was me that interviewed Bates. It's been a really long week. I apologize.
See, it's like the Stephen King thing.
It's like the Stephen King thing, man. My brain has been eaten. Sat down with Bates, and he was very forthcoming. And the guy, he's a real smart guy. I mean, if we have to have somebody in charge of this thing, this guy's the guy to do it. Certainly not Preston Dorflinger. They were very reluctant to talk with us at first on camera, but once we got him on, he answered a lot of every question that I had, and didn't dodge them. I think he's got a long road ahead of him. I don't envy his position. The first thing that they're trying to do is they're pushing for transparency, and they're pushing to regain the public's trust. And they let the public know that by sending out a press release at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon. Come on, guys.
Oh, by the way, that reminds me. Remember we said last week, what will she do?
Yep.
She being the chief executive. The press release came out at 5:59 last Friday.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. I mean, please. After 8 years, they haven't figured this out?
Oh, they figured it out. They figured it out perfectly. They're doing exactly what they want to do. She's a lame duck governor. It's not like she has to worry about getting votes or getting public approval or anything at this point. She's going to do what she's going to do, and the heck with everybody else.
So back to Bates. Did you get to learn a little bit about this guy?
I did. I learned a bit about him, and I learned quite a bit about what his plan is going forward. And the plan is, and it's a lot of it, you're left scratching your head saying, well, why wasn't this done 20 years ago? They've got this antiquated computer system called Fiscal. Fiscal is like circa 1982. It's not compatible with anything else that the state has, which is what enabled them to run two different set of books. They're working to do away with that and get on the system that the rest of the state is on, which is step one.
Was the running two different books then, because Fiscal is so old, a necessity? Or did they opt to stay on Fiscal and have to be in this other system because the state doesn't run on Fiscal? I
don't know the answer to that, but my assumption would be that they ran on it and you made it work for them, kind of a thing. And the impression that I got in talking with other people over there is that they would bring in different accountants from time to time. Different employees come in, people come and go. And as they're bringing in these new employees, these new accountants, the accountants are saying, hey, this isn't right what you're doing here. And somebody above them would say, well, this is the way that we've done it for 20 years. So you better make it work or there's the door. And the accountants would say, you know what? I'm going to make it work. And they made it work. Somewhat. But again, $30 million.
Many years ago when I would write speeches for politicians, the greatest line in Oklahoma history to get applause for, and if I'm elected, I will make sure that Roger Dale Stafford finally goes to the electric chair. Roger Dale Stafford is an infamous mass killer from the 70s. I think he did his crimes in the late 70s. There can be, this is just instinct, but when you look at this, there cannot be a better applause line this coming summer and fall than, and if you elect me, I will make sure we clean up the State Department of Health. It's got to be the number one.
It'll be a winner.
Right.
It'll be a winner.
And it won't just be the State Department of Health. If these guys are smart, and they are smart, they're going to say, you know what? This may be very widespread. We just don't know the answer, but you elect me. I'm going to find out exactly where the money is, and we're going to go for it.
Todd Lamb's already running on that.
Already running on it.
He's got ads running saying that exact same thing.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Tourism. Anybody who heard that interview with that cat that runs that thing? Remember I was listening to it driving along, which the house was putting that on the web, and there was one where I can't remember what the guy's name is, but he said, my size intimidates people, and I don't know why they're talking. I mean, it was the sort of stuff that you see in child fiction. It was ridiculous. And there's more of those agencies out there. Back to your point, it makes it very difficult to run on, well, we need a lot more revenue whenever this sort of stuff is going on right in front of your face.
Right. And the truth is, even though we're being told, this is the only agency that had issues, we just don't know. Because there haven't been good, solid audits done of any of these agencies in years and years. And Gary Jones will be the first to tell you that in terms of what happened with the health department. He said, I can only audit the information they're giving me. That's it. And his hands are pretty much tied. Unless you've got somebody who is the director of the Department of Health, for example, coming up and saying, hey, can you audit us? We know that we're intentionally misspending $30 million and hiding $30 million from the legislature. Can you audit us? What do you think the chances are that's going to happen?
Has anybody heard from the speaker about going back over the testimony during the hearings that we held, that appeared to be moot at this point because they were talking about money that actually wasn't missing. So I know that McCall was talking about going back and looking at the testimony to see if somebody had lied under oath, because they were under oath in those things. Have we heard anything else about that?
Have not. And that might take a while.
I would assume so. It was a lot of testimony. I mean, you were there every day. I was there some of the nights. Like, yeah, it was a lot.
It was a lot of testimony, and it was a lot of insider information testimony too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can we get to the new Senate team for just a moment? About 3 weeks ago, I had Senator Treat in here, and we were talking about the Facebook Lives we did during the walkout. I was just astounded this week, and Aaron Cooper was with him. I said, you guys ought to look into this. So this week they have, I'm not taking credit for it, I'm just saying this is what's happening technology-wise. He has his announcement about his leadership team. He did a Facebook Live. Mm-hmm. Now, let's just go ahead and get this right out there because we want to embarrass him. One reporter shows up at the Capitol to cover it.
Trey Savage. Yeah, but you know what? He got the follow-up questions. So that was kind of cool. What do you know about the new team? Because there's also a new Democrat leader in the Senate. I think that what we're going to see with the new team, I mean, these are experienced people, the people that he chose, including somebody who was running against him for the position that he's in now.
Senator Thompson.
Right. So to bring in Thompson into his close circle, that's a gutsy move. That tells me that he's not somebody who's just looking for yes men. He's looking for somebody who's going to give him some challenges, which is good. I think what we're going to see is we're not going to see the same level of fighting that we've seen in previous years because the economy is a lot better. So I think you're going to see a little bit more agreements between Republicans and Democrats. That said, it's difficult to predict what's going to happen up there at that Capitol.
What about agreements between the Senate and the House? I mean, for a little while there during this last run of sessions, it was almost like if the House said things were up, the Senate would be like, well, it's up, but also kind of to the right.
Right.
You know, they were never quite in sync for two houses that were both led by the same party.
Right. And they didn't really seem to get along very well, quite honestly. That's a question that remains to be seen because, you know, Treat was pretty high up on the totem pole last year also. And we saw a lot of that conflict between the House and Senate last year. So I don't know at which point somebody's going to extend the olive branch and make nice. But you're right. It seemed more like with the House and Senate, it seemed like what you would expect to see with Republicans and Democrats as opposed to two different houses controlled by the same party.
I think it also depends on how ugly the midterms get here. The elections and re-elections or not re-elections, depending on how things shake out in November. So where that ends up, we'll find out.
I'd like to see the return of the Zach Galifianakis program that he and the Senator Treat and Leader Eccles did between two houses. Did you guys see that?
I did.
I told Eccles last time and Treat the last time I saw him, I said, get a microphone next time. But it's pretty, I kept waiting for Zach Galifianakis to come walking in there. Kay Floyd. So you've got two women in real high positions, although there aren't many women left after you put them on the front line. There's not many rank and file, right? Kay
Floyd, we've all heard the statement that when this guy walks in the room, he thinks he's the smartest person in the room. Kay Floyd is the smartest person in the room pretty much any place she goes. She's brilliant and she knows how government works and she knows how people work. I think she's a great choice.
Also one of the few actual attorneys up at the Capitol, right? There's only like 4, 5 that are actually working. So people who studied law, making the law, she's now one of the only ones, and she's not in a leadership position, which can only be a good thing for everybody overall.
And it's fun watching her on the floor. She was questioning somebody. I can't remember who it was, but that person made the comment that anytime Kay Floyd asks you a question, you know she already knows the answer. And she does. I mean, with her, it's a chess game. She's always 15 moves ahead of the next guy.
It was a strong pick by the party. It really was.
Agreed.
So that's saying that she's playing chess while everybody else is playing checkers.
Connect 4, maybe.
Let's get back to medical marijuana. Have you heard any updates on the other movement going on to try to get full-blown marijuana sales on the ballot? Is that going anywhere? There's so much news.
It's not going anywhere.
It's not.
It's not. Even if they were to get enough signatures, there's not enough time to verify those signatures. So it really isn't going anywhere, but it's a great test balloon to see where it's going to go in the future. And it's a great way to start spreading the word and getting people on board with it. But in terms of it actually passing, not going to happen. Yeah, not this year.
Not this year, yeah, definitely not this year. I mean, depending how should this pass and should the legislature have to come back. I mean, they would almost have to come back.
They would have to come back.
They would have to. Yeah. So depending on what they
you're talking medical marijuana.
Medical marijuana, yes. So depending on what the framework they outline, when they would almost certainly have to come back to do medical marijuana, we'll see. You know, that'll also be another test balloon for recreational marijuana because they'll have to have some kind of outline there.
And quite honestly, they were very smart. There's a lot of smartness going on up there, which is unusual because we don't expect that from the Capitol. But they were very smart to put off making any of these rules until after the primary elections. Smart plan.
So here we go with that. By the way, the Shepard poll has the medical marijuana initiative passing. So McFerrin's got his work cut out for him. They're going to roll the docs out front. Hey, speaking of another one that rolled out, which is not real timely right now, but this optometrist versus Walmart deal, now that's going to be in November. But over the past 30 years, there's not been a more influential lobby at the state of Oklahoma than the optometric lobby.
It's impressive.
They're good.
It is, and it's been just a slow, steady slog year after year after year of them just leaning and working on people to get what they want. It's a feat of lobbying.
Well, here's the thing. Over the years, and they were taught many, many years by an old House Speaker from the 60s about how to do this. You're a lawmaker and you're going on vacation in the summertime and you need somebody to make sure your papers are picked up. No, nobody has papers anymore. But
what's a paper?
Yeah, I know. Why did I bring that up? Anyway, you need your dog water. Optometrists would do it. Docs, not so much. And I've been in a lot of campaigns around public issue campaigns. Optometrists will slap you and they won't even say, I'm sorry. And they have been doing, but this is a different cat. This is going to involve Walmart. We're one of only 3 states where you can't do that. And the prices of glasses, undeniable. It's more expensive if you're an old person or a young person to get glasses in the state of Oklahoma. The question is, do you think they might have finally met their match going up against Uncle Sam?
It's a good question. I mean, it's, I don't want to say David and Goliath because it's such a cliche, but it really is. Uncle Sam, he has a whole bunch of money, but is he friends with the people up at the Capitol, like you've said, the lobbyists for the optometrists are? I don't know the answer to that. And it's an issue where do people really think that much about their eyes? Is there that much focus on it other than where can I get the cheapest glasses? It may be a battle for them. They may have met their match.
Yeah. Is this going to be one of those things where they just check yes because they're going down the list of questions and it's a long ballot and they have no idea what it is really? Because I haven't seen much from Walmart or any PACs against the optometrists. So I think it's one of those issues where they're like, glasses, sure, for everyone. I like people being able to see and then just move on to the next question that they might care about more. I don't know.
Or is it a question of these legislators saying, oh, glasses, well, my good buddy over here, the lobbyist, has told me that I should vote against this, so I will. That's a good possibility. This will be one to watch. No pun intended.
Will you guys tell me what you think is going to be issues that we're not talking about now that will pop up in the next 2 or 3 weeks and especially run off in November that are sleepers?
The death penalty, I think, is out there. I mean, the state just said we're going to move to a never before used process for putting inmates on death row to death, nitrogen hypoxia. The process of that is still kind of out in the ether somewhere. We're not quite sure how that's going to work. And I think when we get closer, probably past the primaries, it's not on there just yet. But when you get into the real fights between the two parties, I think that'll be an issue that'll be a sleeper that'll pop up. Because we haven't had executions in 3 years now. And it's a lot of people want them back. It's still the majority of Oklahomans are in support of the death penalty. I think you'll see some back and forth on that.
Yeah, good call. And I think we might see some more education zombie bills popping back up again, stuff that we thought that was dead that returns back to life again. And I can't think of specifics right now, but I think we're going to see some of the education bills come back.
Also some criminal justice stuff as well. This is getting international, so I won't go on very long about this, but the Supreme Court case, the Murphy case about the crime that happened in 1999, it happened on technically Creek land, according to the defense, based on a treaty that was signed in 1866 that Congress never rescinded. So that's at the Supreme Court now. That would split the state into 2 jurisdictions. And I think some of the criminal justice things would come up and involve that conversation. That court case won't get decided until after the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, comes back from their summer break. So that'll happen after the election.
And as long as we're handing out kudos to the attorney who dug that one up. That was
he earned his bones for that one.
Yeah, that was some good work.
Hearing any more rumblings about perhaps some lawsuits dealing with the health department on behalf of those employees?
Rumblings. I know that some groups have met with their attorneys to talk about it. They're going through the motions to get set for it, but certainly OPEA is mulling over a lawsuit against the health department.
Yeah, and there's some, like you said, individual groups that are starting Facebook pages trying to get people together for a possible class action suit. It looks like they've got a pretty good chance of getting one too, honestly.
You mentioned the criminal justice reform. Let's talk about corrections for just a second, but a point of personal privilege for just a moment. Joe Albaugh has been a friend of mine for a very long time, all the way back to Oklahoma, and then, of course, he was chief of staff to Governor Bush in Texas, and now he's at Department of Corrections. One of the things that hasn't happened since you mentioned the death penalty stuff is that he hasn't been there. He wasn't there when all that stuff was going on. Diane Albaugh passed away this past week. And Joe, that is his life partner and the love of his life. And Diane, on her own merits, a wonderful woman, a wonderful mother, a great lawyer. And she passed away this week. So we were thinking about Joe Albaugh, who was working was seeing what he was saying, he was working this week. He weighed in on the selection of the Senate leadership team. Mm-hmm. He said, great kudos on that particular selection. Are you hearing much corrections talk? They've got a little bit more than it wasn't a flat budget, my understanding, but the criminal justice reforms got signed. Could that be one of the sleepers?
It could be. And also, Joe's request for 2 new prisons at a cost of $800 million. I think that you're going to see that they're going to be taking that much more seriously as we're seeing an improvement in the economy. They're not going to raise taxes for it, but you're going to see them borrow money for it, I suspect, because we've got to put these people someplace. And yeah, our prisons are bursting at the seams, and a lot of them are very old, and it's getting dangerous. And if we don't have real good, solid criminal justice reform, we're still going to continue to see the problems that we've got with full prisons, especially at a time when we see Texas just down to ourselves closing down prisons because they've put in effective criminal justice reform. And for whatever reason, we're not mirroring that.
Yeah, I think, and wasn't there an effort this last session to put through some of those Texas-like programs? So we're talking about that. I think the correction stuff has gotten lost in the education stuff for this year. So even if it doesn't come up during the campaign, I mean, it most certainly will, but if it doesn't, by some happenstance, it will come up this next session. It almost has to. It's
the thing that I think you're going to have to watch because we're talking a whole lot of money. The governor did act on several of those criminal justice reform pieces. They're not huge pieces, but it's, things move slowly up at the state capitol in Oklahoma, and change is hard to come by. The fact that those passed at all, I thought, was pretty remarkable.
Let me ask you about a possible sleeper story. The Republicans, big majorities, both sides, they've been heavily supported by oil and gas. But late in the session, oil and gas got real unhappy. We've heard publicly from the OIPA, we've heard publicly from Chad Warmington, and those guys, they were unhappy. Warmington, even a year or so ago, was saying raising GPT is a screw-up in terms of long-term for Oklahoma. We know that story. Then they started going after wind. So at the end of the day, 2 of the biggest industries in terms of PAC donations and dollars and support, oil and gas and wind, while some in oil and gas don't like wind and vice versa, and then some in wind are drilling wells. I mean, that's just not a known narrative. But the fact is, there were some real unhappy big potential donors moving forward, and especially for Republicans.
Yeah.
What your thoughts about where that story might go?
Really kind of tough to say. Everybody walked away from the table publicly saying, you know what, this is fair and this is right. And privately they're saying, you know what, I'm really ticked off right now. And this was one of those deals where you can't pass a huge tax increase like this without there being some type of a sacrificial lamb. And in this case, the oil industry, which is really in charge of the state, had to make some concessions. It's either make them now at the legislative level, or else it's going to go to a vote of the people, and it's going to go to a gross production tax of probably 7% or higher. So they had to take a couple on the chin with this one.
I mean, really, having oil and gas as your sacrificial lamb is like having oil and gas be the sacrificial buffalo. I mean, that was a pretty big deal to almost turn their backs on them with some of those votes. And so I think what we'll have to watch is the PACs. They'll throw their money into this. It won't be directly from Harold Hamm or Devin or specifically, but it'll be in their PACs. It'll be in the places that are going to hit these folks the most. The issue ads, those campaigns. It'll be against all those red votes that were up on their newsletter.
Well, let me ask you this then, because this was a case where the politicians were put in a really bad position, because as they're walking into an election year, they're either going to be labeled as we're anti-teacher, anti-education, everybody loves teachers, everybody loves education, out the door you go, or else you're going to have to beat up on oil a little bit and you're going to have to lose that PAC money. So, I mean, talk to me a bit about that. They were put in a real bad position here.
I think they're banking on people's animosity to oil and gas to a certain extent. It's that same thing, that fed upness we were talking about before. You talk to some folks out here, I mean, obviously not the ones that rely on oil and gas for their jobs, but you talk to folks and they're confused, concerned, fed up, all three at once about the reliance on oil and gas and energy in Oklahoma. And so I don't know if some of the politicians who are running this year are going to try to bank on that sentiment. It would be smart for them to, if they're not getting that PAC money. I don't know where else or how else you could fight money like that, especially in this state.
Yep. And the mindset that why am I paying a higher percentage of my income than oil and gas is paying of their income? And you're right. I mean, this was a bad position for the legislature to be in. It's just they couldn't have set themselves up to be in a much worse position than they were in this past legislative session going into an election year.
Last question. It's more of a statement, but we mentioned that Senator Treat makes a big announcement for his leadership team on Facebook Live. Just let that one wash over you for just a moment. Didn't hold a presser at the Capitol. Mm-hmm. By the way, how many pressers during a session will you cover a week? Is there a number?
A metric poop ton. There's a bunch.
How much of that actually gets out?
A lot of it does. A lot of it does. We do a lot with it. I was kind of surprised with the way that Treat handled this too. What were your thoughts on it?
I've said for a long time, so I'm surprised that there's a metric poop ton of people still doing pressers at the Capitol. But my question is, why would you want the media, if you're some of these groups that are out trying to reach people, why would you walk down to the fourth floor, all due respect, right, and hold a press conference to decide to put the stuff out and then let the media decide what filters out to the public? There's as much stories about trying to communicate directly, maybe easier to cover. I don't know, but they tend to do that. And as we know, we referenced your hiring a couple of years ago in terms of you're the only TV guy that had been doing this in the last quarter century. So my thoughts are, it's like we're really late to the table on that, seeing that sort of thing.
Well, it's who they're talking to. You do a press conference at the Capitol. Not so much the media's getting played, but they're talking to a certain set of people who are going to pick up the physical paper in the morning. They're talking to people who are watching the feeds. They're talking to the people who live this life like we do. And then to bypass, to get right to the voters, probably a Facebook Live is the best way to do that if you want to avoid, diffusion in the media. And so I think it's a calculation to hold the press conference at the Capitol because they know that the people who they want to talk to are also watching.
And you hit it right on that. It's the demographics. If you want to get the younger folks, if you want to get your message out to the younger folks, you want to be using the social media. But at the same time, those are the people that are not as politically active. Those are the people who are less apt to be voting right now. If you want to really reach the voters, at least for the next few years, you still have to do it the old-fashioned way: radio, TV, newspaper.
Last night, when this situation happened at Lake Hefner, I got my notification on my phone. I'm watching Aaron Brilbeck on my phone. I'm not even near a TV. Do you see that affecting the campaigns? That sort of technology that sort of ability to deliver news really fast?
It is. And honestly, I think that they're in the same boat that we are in the media, and that we know that it's important. We just don't know exactly how to rein it in. We don't know exactly yet how to use it to the best of our ability. So we're trying a bunch of different things, but this is still, it's relatively new technology. And we're trying to figure out the best way to use it. The very same with the politicians. On the plus side, the plus for them and the plus for anybody who advertises is right now it's still for the most part free. And as you pointed out, you control the narrative. If nobody's asking you questions, you say what you want to say and you're not questioned. That's one of the pluses of it. But the downside is, as we talked about, you still want to reach the older demographic, the 35, 40 plus. You still got to go with TV, newspaper, radio.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first politician to figure out that the more concise you can be and get it into a push notification, which we have all the time, those kind of things that you don't have to actually open your phone to read. I'll get them from the New York Times. I'll get them from us. I'll get them. I follow all the other stations too. It's competition. But I think the first campaign to figure out how to make that effective will really skyrocket in being able to control their narrative. And yeah, if you want to reach the older demographics, you want to reach the people who tend to spend money on campaigns, who tend to be out to vote, who tend to be the opinion leaders in their group of friends, you're still going to have to go through traditional media. They go there, they sit down for the stories. But the average voter, the average maybe not so likely voter, is going to be on Facebook. They're going to be on their home screens. They're not going to find a newspaper article and sit down and read it.
But you're right. It's much more rapid than what we're used to. For example, we're talking about the shooting over at Louis. Before my boss even called me to say, hey, can you come in and cover this? I'd already seen 3-4 push alerts on it. It's effective. I already started heading in that direction knowing that my boss is going to be calling me. It's effective.
How do you have any predictions on how you think this is going to affect campaigns in Oklahoma? Because Treat Steal was the first one I've ever seen. I've not seen somebody making a major announcement like that. Now, we were doing those Facebook Lives from camps every day during the teacher walkout, but by the same token, I didn't see much of this in terms of from the legislative end, except for those Facebook Lives that Corey Williams and Scott Inman and those folks were doing. How are you going to cover something like that in the future? That's
a tough question because, again, he'll only be reaching out to the people that he knows are following him. He's only preaching to the choir kind of a deal. So that's going to be a very difficult thing to try to cover.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what it is. You're only reaching the people that like your page, that are following you on Facebook, on Twitter, whatever, Instagram, whatever they're going to use. Although I'd be interested to see if somebody runs on Instagram. That'd be fun. But we'll see how far this actually gets. I mean, they're still going to need to reach people beyond that core group of voters. They're going to need us. It's still going to have to work that way.
Yeah, and I suspect a lot of the politicians were watching what Treat did to see what happens from here, how well it went over. I didn't see a whole lot of real good press coverage of it afterwards. So did his message reach the people that it should have reached? Maybe not.
Let me ask you one final question. It's just one of those, it just occurs to me. Let's say, for example, that I'm going to have a press conference, or I want to make an announcement because I've dug up Jimmy Hoffa's body. So I could hold a presser out on the property, or I could call you, Aaron Brilbeck, and give you an exclusive.
I would prefer you did that.
We would prefer that.
Yeah, let's go that route.
All right, so let's go that route. Will other media ignore it?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It depends on the story. With a big enough story, they won't ignore it.
But in a smaller market where there's less media, it's easier to ignore the story, isn't it?
Yes and no. It just depends on how intense the story is and how important the story is. I mean, they might be, a day late to it, but at that point, it's out and it's become a thing. And you have that makes it into 4 days of coverage. So you'd almost be better off giving it to a single place. News9, cough, cough.
Sure.
And then letting that play out for 4 days where you've now given just your side, and that started the narrative.
But again, social media can change the dynamic for that too, because back in the day, if Scott Mitchell comes up to Aaron Brilbeck and says, hey, I found Hoffa's body, I want to give you the exclusive, the competition gets it next day at 6 p.m. Now the competition sees it on my station, makes a couple of quick phone calls, and tweets it out minutes after I air it. So the appearance to the public is, they had it too. They're on top of things. So, yeah, it's a game changer.
So going with an exclusive with you was the right move to make.
It sure was.
Yeah.
So the moral of the story is if you've got a really good story, call Aaron Brilbeck News9. Forget it.
Let's just stay with that as we end. If people, because campaigns are coming, and you know what, you're going to get phone calls from people going, you know what such and such is doing. How do people get a hold of Aaron Brilbeck if they want to pitch a story idea?
You can contact me here at the station. I'm always happy to give up my cell phone number, 405-669-0632. No drunk dialing after 2 a.m., please. And yeah, give me a call. Let's talk.
Hit me up on my email, depending on when I'm sleeping. The phone calls I might not answer. Scott, you've run into that a couple times. It's grant.hermes, Hermes, at News9, which is the number 9.net.
Or Facebook and Twitter. We're both on.
All those things. Yep.
It's a brave new world. Well, episode 2 is in the bag. Thanks again. By the way, for folks that are listening, we saw the numbers from the first podcast. Not bad.
For out the gate, not bad at all, man.
Yeah.
Give us a like, give us a share. Do the reviews. They help. They really help. Tell your friends, all of it. If you didn't like the podcast, don't say anything.
Call Alex Cameron.
Exactly.
That's what you need to do. Thanks for being here, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're listening to the new media, the Mitchell Talks Network. Learn more at MitchellTalks.com and follow me, Scott Mitchell, on Twitter @MitchellTalks.